Hey, this is John Gilroy, sitting in a barbecue joint in Purcellville, Virginia, and today we're going to talk about infrastructure enabling innovation. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Melissa Palmer, president of HashiCorp Federal, and today we're going to talk about providing good citizen experience on secure networks. But before we begin, I would be remiss if I didn't tell the audience that we were recording this from Monk's Barbecue in lovely downtown Purcellville, Virginia. And Melissa, are you going to enjoy lunch here? What are you going to have for lunch?
You have to have the mac and cheese if you come to Monk's.
Mac and cheese is addictive. It's so good. That's great. Now, let's get serious here. The federal government has made a big transition to the cloud over the last 15 years. I remember executives from the federal government being in my radio studio talking about cloud transition and cloud first. And now we've matured. We're at the point now where people are writing books about clouds and everything else. And so the first question to ask is, how can a company like HashiCorp actually bring value to our federal listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, John. HashiCorp is actually uniquely positioned because we enable both the federal government as well as large commercial entities to be able to create what we commonly refer to as the cloud operating model, which is a common way to approach really any flavor of infrastructure, be it on-premise or any flavor of cloud, either a government cloud or any commercial cloud, such as AWS, Microsoft, Google, etc.
So if you're waiting in line to get some maybe burnt ends here, and someone turns to you and goes, what does HashiCorp do? Would you say HashiCorp provides a suite of services, suite of products for the federal government? Is that what you say?
Yeah, we absolutely do. As I said, we provide a whole suite of tools that enables what one of my reps calls multi-cloud made easy.
Good. Now, before the interview, we were talking, I took some notes. And, McDonald's talks about millions and millions, but one of your products is called Terraform or something. You're telling me there are 450 million downloads? Is this a real number?
Yeah, and that's just in the last 12 months, actually.
Whoa.
That's just not Terraform. So we also have Vault, Console, Nomad, Packer. So we have about 8 products in total in our portfolio. But yeah, 450 million downloads is accurate for the last 12 months.
Well, amongst here we have special sauce. We have sauce from Alabama, sauce from Texas. So what's the special sauce that HashiCorp brings?
That's a great question. It's really the ability to give the customer a common platform by which to build, automate, deploy, secure, connect, and run their infrastructure.
I remember years ago when I first talked to people from VMware, and they said, well, it's actually, John, it's a virtual server. It's just like the regular server, or it's in a virtual environment. And it seems like what you're doing here is you're almost treating the routers and the switches and the hardware as virtual too. So you're virtualizing a network to control it. Is that right?
It's not virtualization, so it is a little bit different. And I'm glad you brought up VMware. I have a very soft place in my heart. That was where I started at the startup days of VMware. But what's interesting about HashiCorp is I think that we are uniquely positioned very similar to VMware because this is a real transition that we're making right now between on-premise infrastructure and cloud. It's sort of one of those major shifts that occurs every 10 years in the industry, and HashiCorp is that ubiquitous approach to infrastructure. And really no one else can, that's our key differentiator. No one else can really provide that across any flavor of infrastructure or cloud. So especially today with the skill shortage that we see, certainly in the federal government, but really across the industry and IT, it becomes very difficult and almost impossible to have skill sets to manage every different type of infrastructure, be it VMware, be it Kubernetes, AWS, Google, all of those capabilities, all of those infrastructures or clouds have slightly different capabilities, but they also require different skill sets to manage and secure.
Well, we're at a restaurant, and I'm sure if you went to the chef in the back room or the manager, they have to provision, they have to bring in meat, I guess, and different types of beers and everything else for a restaurant here. And so I think the people in the cloud services world have appropriated that term provisioning, and they talk about provisioning the cloud. And so that's one aspect that you can help our federal with provisioning cloud services. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where Terraform comes in. Terraform enables the customer to automate that provisioning, to really sort of press the easy button, if you will, so that the infrastructure can be automated in such a way that that common platform is created that can be pushed out to any cloud. I do a podcast about satellites in space, and believe it or not, they're talking about ground station as a service in some of these different parts of the satellite community. So I'm wondering, is this infrastructure as a service? Is that what this is? Am I dancing on that? Or absolutely. That is definitely one aspect of our capability. Is, as I mentioned a moment ago, Terraform provides infrastructure as a service. Our next guest is going to be world-famous Dave Linthicum. And in a recent post on LinkedIn, he talked about repatriation. And because we're in a political town in Washington, D.C., no, it's got nothing to do with anything. It's got everything to do with moving in and out of the cloud, going back to service. And so we know that commercial companies are maybe taking some work to the cloud and then bringing it back home, called repatriation. Is this something that happens in the federal government? And where do you fit in this whole moving back from the cloud on site? I think if it hasn't already, I think it will in the future. When you look at the commercial side, they're a little bit farther ahead in terms of their adoption of cloud than the federal government. So I think that that's something that the government really needs to consider now before the cloud continues to expand, right, their usage. Because what you find is if the government uses the tools for whatever the cloud service provider that they choose at the time, then they don't have the right tools to bring that infrastructure either back on-prem or maybe to a different cloud service provider in the future. I was reading an article on Federal News Network, and there's an article that talked about your company, and one of the headlines was, "Digital transformation is a journey, not a project." So this must be on your business card or something, because you can't just flip a switch. You have to structure things in order to be able to manage them correctly. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a journey, and it's frankly a very complex journey. What we find is customers can jump into that journey at various different places, and there's not really a right or wrong answer per se, but what we find is the most critical aspect is that they have to take sort of a holistic view of that move to the cloud, because if they don't, it's sort of like not building a house with the proper the proper foundation in place, right? If the foundation is probably the most critical part. Once you have that foundation in place, then you can add whatever you want on top and be in sort of a secure place to continue to add. And I think that's what the customers are finding with being able to build that infrastructure out so that they can, as you say, repatriate or be able to move from one cloud service provider to the other. One of the things that we're finding, it kind of reminds me of the startup days of VMware. There was something back then called VM sprawl, right, where virtualizing became such a great thing that everyone was doing it, basically. And so then the VMs sort of got out of control from a management perspective. And I think that moving to the cloud tends to be very similar in that what we find is customers' cloud bill just sort of grows and grows and grows as those developers are creating more cloud developed products. And this just sort of gives them a way to get their arms around their cloud spend and be able to pivot if need be, either for whatever reason back to on-prem or, again, to a different cloud service provider in the future. A lot of the phrases associated with cloud computing is enabling a federal agency to scale easily. And if you go to YouTube and type in HashiCorp, you'll see all kinds of videos. And one of the phrases that they used was consistent automated workflow. And so that's what you can assist with, is this consistency, because it can actually save an agency money, can't it? Oh, absolutely. Money, time to mission for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Getting an application deployed when it's mission critical is the most important thing. Is time to mission. So yeah, we can absolutely reduce time, cost, and certainly complexity as well.
I'm just looking at the last 5 years where everyone's had to turn on a dime. All of a sudden, people are remoting in, and I think a lot of cloud services have maybe been underused or maybe over-provisioned, and with a tool like you can provide, it may be giving an agency the ability to optimize their use of a cloud rather than having services that it's like having a 10-bedroom house and just having two people in the house, or having a too small, too big. And so I think this whole idea of automated workflow can take and right-size a lot of the services that a federal agency might use. Is that a good description of what provisioning can do here?
It could be, absolutely, but I think it also just provides that consistent workflow. So, it takes what could be very time-intensive manual processes and automates them in such a way that the time and the complexity is significantly reduced.
So speaking of complexity, there's a user group for your company that's going to start up.
There is.
And tell me more about this group and how people can find more about it. What's it called, the Federal Users Group or something?
It is, yeah. So we have HashiCorp users groups for all of our customers, across the world. And we recently stood up one for the federal community. We had our first meeting on Tuesday of this week.
Wow.
And it's virtual currently. We may in the future have on-site meetups as well. But it's just a way for the HashiCorp community to get together, user community, and exchange best practices, ideas, answer questions. Obviously some of our customers have been using our products for many years. And some of the newer customers can ask questions of those that have more experience. So it's really just a forum for that exchange of information of our customers. And
I will put a link to that user group in the show notes for this episode. And I got to ask a question. So is this an excuse for some salesmen to say, hey, HashiCorp's the greatest, let me come over? So this isn't really a salesy thing. It's more of I think there's people from what they do is maybe they're subject matter experts that can answer questions rather than pushing anything, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, our sales reps are not even in the user group meeting. We do encourage some of our systems engineers to join the meeting just because, if there are questions that can't be answered by other customers, they're there just to answer technical questions.
So let's go back to Terraform. We started talking about that earlier. When we first talked about doing this podcast, you were talking about the prevalence of Terraform throughout the federal government. And I said, well, it sounds like the best kept secret in town. You mean that many agencies are using it and they don't even realize it's part of different packages. So tell me more about that. Terraform is really in a lot of places, isn't it? It
is, not just in the federal government, but really anyone that has IT infrastructure. One of the things that before I came to HashiCorp, I noticed at my previous company was literally every single one of our customers had Terraform in their environment. And that's what we see today. In fact, oftentimes my team will be at various different federal conferences, and we'll be at the conference, have a booth with the HashiCorp logo, and oftentimes our product logos as well. And we'll have customers come up to us and say, hey, we want to meet with Terraform. And we're like, well, we are actually the manufacturer of Terraform. It is so ubiquitous across the market that oftentimes customers know our products more than they know HashiCorp as the manufacturer.
When was the company formed? I'm trying to place.
So the company actually was founded 10 years ago. But it was a startup. It was a university project, much like VMware, actually. University of Washington. Two computer scientists got together and had the idea to help make cloud computing easier and more consistent, frankly.
Yeah. I have a friend who has a 10-year-old son, and I'm sure when he's 20, he's going to be involved in technical situations that we couldn't even dream of now. And I'm just putting this from 10, 15 years ago, there was no role for HashiCorp because there wasn't a prevalence with a multi-cloud and public and private cloud and on-prem services. But now what's happened is it seems like it's a service that has kind of evolved with the proliferation of the cloud now. Everyone's in the multi-cloud. Everyone's got on-prem stuff. People going back and forth. And so how do you even think about managing that without some kind of Terraform out there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of products to manage different flavors of infrastructure, but HashiCorp has really taken the approach that sort of one consistent platform and is the right approach for a multi-cloud environment.
Well, we haven't talked much about the other clubs in your golf bag, the other products that you have. So one is called Nomad, Console, Vault. So what are these other products? How can they help my listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vault is actually our number one tool from a commercial perspective. And Vault helps customers manage their secrets. So that's literally, a secret is defined as any, could be anything, could be a password, any type of credential, so machine to machine, human to machine, application to database, et cetera. So any of those certificates, historically, most customers managed those manually, and in a manual situation, you really can't rotate them nearly often enough. We also find that manually is fraught with errors as well. So systems would just go down entirely because the secrets would be updated manually and cause an outage. So Vault is a really amazing tool that does all of that secrets management in an automated fashion, and can do so really as often as the customer security policy dictates. So, could be every 30 days, could be, every 7 days. We have some customers with very high security requirements that rotate their secrets every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours. I'm not going to ask. I'm going to change topics completely because I want to get in trouble. I referenced an article in Federal News Network earlier in the interview here, and there is a product you folks have called Nomad, and it talks about container orchestration. Now, go back 15 or 20 years. You wouldn't put those two words together ever. Container
Didn't have containers 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Sure.
I was like, what is this? It's like I talked about, our friend who's a 10-year-old and 20. He's going to be talking about things we can't even conceive of now. So, container orchestration. Tell me more.
Yeah, so Kubernetes environments have become very ubiquitous across IT landscapes. We actually partner quite a bit with both Red Hat and Rancher, that are probably the two key partners, industry partners that we work with. And yeah, again, it's a tool that helps to automate and manage the ever-growing Kubernetes infrastructure.
I'm looking at your products, how they're very strategically placed, and especially strategically placed for the federal government. So where do you think the whole idea of HashiCorp is going to evolve in the next? There will be new products added to this, much deeper. So where is your company going to evolve in the next 5 years, you think?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that's interesting about HashiCorp is that we are a 10-year-old company. I think we were a little bit ahead of our time, frankly, because 10 years ago, cloud, as you said, was... Right.
No one talked this tall. Yeah.
Yeah, just getting started. Really more of a...
Kubernetes wasn't even around 10 years ago. It was just starting.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think because of that, we still have, especially in the federal government marketplace, we still have a lot of work to do to help the government customers really get their arms around multi-cloud and do it, efficiently and securely. So it's hard for me to think, honestly, that far out, just because we have so much work to do in the short term.
Right, you just had your first Federal Users Club meeting after millions and millions of downloads all over the world. It's really a kind of an exciting time. I can see where you can see parallels between where VMware was maybe 18 years ago and where HashiCorp is. It's addressing problems that are just kind of developing as we go. It's not problems that you can conceive of. So if you have a flexible approach, you can find out what the problems are and then flex and adapt, especially with all these different products that seem to fit almost like hand in glove for federal problems, don't they? I mean, Nomad, Console, Vault, Terraform, it seems like federal problem, solution, federal problem, solution. It's right step by step, isn't it?
Absolutely. But what you'll find with infrastructure and cloud environments is that infrastructure is the same no matter if it's the federal government, could be the Department of Defense or one of the cabinet level civilian agencies or the IC even. It's exactly the same if you're talking to JP Morgan Chase or Walmart or FedEx. They all have exactly the same challenges. The only difference is, and one of the things that I really like to do is introduce some of my customers on the federal side to some of those larger scale commercial customers, because they can really learn from their best practices and their history, because they tend to be a bit farther along in terms of their adoption of cloud and multi-cloud. And in fact, we actually have what we call, it's our annual users group meeting company-wide called HashiConf. That's coming up October 10th through the 12th in San Francisco. And it's both in person and virtual, but it's a really great opportunity for our customers to learn from each other.
So my govies listening can attend a local federal users group or fly out to San Francisco or maybe attend virtually to understand exactly how they can use to manage their hybrid cloud today, can't they?
Absolutely. And we have tracks and labs that are either for the very technical practitioner level, and we also have an executive level conference so that they can kind of look at it more from a strategic, long-term planning perspective.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we're running out of time here, unfortunately. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Melissa Palmer, President of HashiCorp Federal. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks very much, John. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.